A screaming woman in a parking lot made me buy an entire strip mall. But the real price of that purchase was a secret network that already knew my name. The afternoon sun was beating down, turning the asphalt of the strip mall parking lot into a shimmering mirage. I was trying to back my truck out of my designated parking spot. Spot number 14, if you needed a specific reference, and this woman, this absolute nightmare in pastel athleisure wear, decided that my truck, a very large, very black, very noticeable Ford F-350, dually, was suddenly an obstacle in her path to righteous indignation. I had already checked my mirrors, glanced over my shoulder twice. The lot wasn't busy. A few cars dotted the periphery, but the main thoroughfare was clear. I put the truck in reverse, slowly easing out. That's when the screeching started. It wasn't the sound of tires losing traction. It was the sound of a human being losing their temper. "Hey! Hey you! Are you blind?" I stopped instantly, my foot hovering over the brake. I took a deep breath, knowing exactly where this was going. I rotated my head slowly, like an owl tracking prey, until my eyes landed on the source. She was standing maybe 30 feet behind my rear bumper, arms crossed over a chest that was puffing up like a pufferfish defending its territory. She was maybe 50, blonde hair stiffly pulled back into a ponytail that looked painful, and a pair of sunglasses perched on her head that seemed far too large for her face. She looked like she'd just stepped off the set of a mid-tier 90s sitcom about nosy suburbanites. I put the truck in park, let the engine idle. It's a big engine, it rumbles. Sometimes the rumble itself is enough to intimidate, but not today. Today it just seemed to fuel her fire. I rolled down my window, the driver's side naturally, to give her the full view of me, a 6'4" black man in a quiet but expensive-looking polo shirt. I didn't smile. Smiling only invites further misinterpretation when dealing with certain individuals. "Ma'am, I apologize," I said, my voice calm, measured. "I didn't see you coming. I'm backing out now." She took 3 fast steps forward, planting herself squarely in the lane, effectively boxing me in entirely. Now, I couldn't move forward without hitting her, and moving backward meant I'd be reversing into the spot I just vacated, which wasn't ideal. "Oh, you didn't see me?" she repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm, so thick you could spread it on toast. She gestured wildly with one perfectly manicured hand toward the whole expanse of the lot. "This lot is half empty. You people always do this. Just drive like the rules don't apply to you." The word hung in the air. You people. My jaw tightened. I kept my hands visible on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. This was a delicate dance I'd performed too many times in my life. I was a regional VP for a tech firm. I owned 3 houses, 2 of which were appreciating assets in neighborhoods that would happily refuse me a viewing 10 years ago. Yet here I was, being lectured in a parking lot by someone whose primary occupation seemed to be judging strangers. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I asked you to step aside so I could leave," I reiterated, injecting just a hint more steel into my tone. "There's no need to use that kind of language." She laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that made the nearby patrons of Nails by Nikki probably pause their pedicures. "Oh, I'm sorry. Is the big bad truck driver getting his feelings hurt? Maybe if you'd parked like a civilized member of society, instead of taking up 2 spots like some kind of entitled thug." "I am parked in 1 spot, ma'am," I interrupted, pointing to the faded white line perfectly bisecting my massive tires. "And I was here first. You drove in after I stopped." She wasn't listening. She was already dialing something on her phone. Her eyes narrowed into slits of pure, unadulterated aggression. "I'm calling management," she declared, speaking loudly enough for the entire block to hear. "I'm calling the owner of this entire operation, because clearly they allow animals to roam the premises without supervision. You are harassing me. You are blocking my way. I have an appointment at Trim and Tone in 15 minutes, and thanks to your reckless driving, I'm going to be late." I leaned back against the leather seat. This was going to be an event. I reached into my console, pulled out my own phone, and started recording. The little red dot glowed, a silent promise of accountability. "Go ahead, ma'am," I said pleasantly, nodding toward her. "Call whoever you need to call. I'll wait right here." She looked at my phone, then back at me, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face, quickly replaced by doubling down on the fury. She jammed the phone against her ear. Yes, hello. I need to speak to whoever manages this property, immediately. I am being threatened by a man in a truck who refuses to move. Yes, threatening. He's being aggressive. He's scaring the customers. Get him out of here before he causes an accident. She waited, listening, jabbing a finger into the air towards me for emphasis. I watched the whole spectacle with the detached interest of a nature documentarian observing a territorial display. Well, what does he say? I prompted when she paused her rant. She glared at me, triumphant. The manager says they'll be right out. They sounded very concerned about you, sir. Very concerned. I offered a small, almost invisible shrug. Good. I'm glad someone's coming. The next 10 minutes were excruciatingly slow. She paced 3 steps left, 3 steps right, occasionally pausing to loudly breathe into her phone, narrating my continued stillness. I just sat there, letting the heat build, letting the silence between her shouts stretch. Finally, a sensible silver sedan pulled into the lot, moving cautiously, clearly anticipating a genuine emergency. 2 men got out. One was portly, sweating profusely in a polo shirt with a small logo I didn't immediately recognize, clutching a set of keys. The other was younger, wearing a suit jacket that looked wildly out of place among the nail salons and yoga studios. They approached cautiously, circling the truck as if it might spontaneously combust. The sweating man, who I assumed was the property manager, spoke first, his voice squeaky with anxiety. Sir? Sir, can we talk for a moment? Ma'am, please, let's just take a breath. The Karen pointed dramatically at me. That's him. He's been harassing me. I demand you tell him to move his massive vehicle and leave the property immediately. The sweating manager looked at me, then nervously at the younger man in the suit. Sir, I'm Marty, from Property Services. I understand there's been a situation. Can you just tell me what happened from your perspective? I unbuckled my seatbelt, the metallic click sounding deafening in the sudden quiet. I opened the door slowly, swinging my legs out and standing up to my full height. I was wearing expensive Italian loafers, and I made sure to plant one firmly on the ground right next to the bright yellow curb stripe. Marty, I acknowledged him smoothly, ignoring the Karen entirely. The perspective is simple. This woman insisted on standing behind my vehicle while I was executing a necessary maneuver in a parking lot clearly marked for ingress and egress. She then escalated the situation by making baseless accusations of threat and harassment, all while using racially charged language toward me. Marty's face went through 5 shades of pale in rapid succession. He kept glancing at the smartly dressed young man beside him, who had remained utterly silent, just observing, arms folded inside his expensive suit jacket. I see, Marty stammered. Well, she's quite upset. She said she was calling the owner. Sir, I apologize profusely for the inconvenience. If you could just maneuver your truck, we can escort her away. I finally looked directly at the younger man in the suit. He met my gaze without flinching. He had the calm, unnerving focus of someone who expects things to go his way. Who are you? I asked him, my voice losing none of its careful control. He straightened his jacket slightly. My name is David Chen. I'm the lead counsel for Meridian Development Group. We handle the leasing and acquisitions for this entire block, including the lot you are currently parked in. I let a genuine, slow smile spread across my face for the first time. It was a dangerous smile, one that promised financial ruin. David, I said, nodding. Good to meet you. I'm Daniel Hayes. You might want to check your roster of tenants before you let Marty here start handing out eviction notices. Marty choked on air. The Karen stopped mid-rant, her jaw actually slackening. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out a key fob, not for my truck, but a sleek metallic key card, and clicked the button. From the far end of the strip mall, near the vacant storefront that had been empty for months, a large professional-grade steel gate swung open with a low hydraulic hum. I looked from Marty's horrified face to the now petrified Karen, and then back to David Chen, who was slowly starting to grin. Marty, David, I continued, stepping past them toward my truck cab again. Tell me, do you happen to know what plot A4 is leased for? Because I just finalized the paperwork this morning to purchase it. And plot A5, A6, A7. I paused, pulling my phone out of the recording mode and looking at the screen. In fact, I bought the entire south block of this development about an hour ago. That includes this parking lot, the one you're standing on, and every single storefront from Trim and Tone to Nails by Nikki. I leaned back into the truck cab, resting my elbow on the door frame, my eyes locked on the woman who had just called me an animal. "So Marty, David, tell me," I said, my voice dropping to a low, resonant tone that echoed slightly off the brick facade. "Who exactly is blocking who out of my parking lot now?" The silence that followed my declaration was profound. It was the kind of silence that eats sound, the kind you only get when reality has violently collided with deeply ingrained arrogance. Marty looked like he was trying to decide which emergency exit to take, possibly simultaneously. David Chen, the lawyer, was the only one who seemed to retain any semblance of professional composure, though his eyes were wide, assessing the sudden, seismic shift in power dynamics. The Karen, however, had a different reaction. Her initial shock gave way almost instantly to a dangerous, desperate surge of denial. Her face, moments ago mottled with fury, now settled into a mask of petulant disbelief. "Oh, stop it!" she spat, waving a dismissive hand. "That's ridiculous. You think you can just buy up a whole block because you drive a big truck? I don't believe you for a second. You're just some opportunistic loudmouth trying to intimidate us. You probably don't even own that truck, let alone this property." I let her monologue for a moment, enjoying the show. It was important to let them fully digest the impossibility of the situation before delivering the final blow. I reached back into the cab of the F-350 and retrieved a sleek, leather-bound portfolio that I usually kept locked in my safe at home. I flipped it open just enough for the edge of the document to be visible. It was crisp, official, and stamped with the seal of the county recorder's office. "David, perhaps you can clarify for our concerned tenant here," I said, nodding toward the bewildered lawyer. "Is the closing finalized on the acquisition of the Mercantile Plaza assets from the Harrington Trust?" David Chen blinked, recovering his focus with visible effort. He approached the portfolio cautiously, peering at the documents inside with the trained eye of someone who deals in high-stakes transactions daily. He straightened up, running a hand through his perfectly gelled hair. "Mr. Hayes," David said, his voice low and respectful now, laced with a sudden professional interest. "The closing was indeed completed this morning at 10 a.m. sharp. I was just reviewing the final transfer papers on the way over, anticipating the transition meetings next week. I wasn't aware the previous owner had granted anyone interim access to the site. Congratulations on the purchase." Marty wilted entirely. He actually sagged against the side of a nearby Subaru, looking utterly defeated. "The owner. You are the owner," he whispered, staring at my feet planted firmly on my asphalt. "I am," I confirmed. "Which means, Miss—" I turned my attention back to the woman who still stood defiantly between my truck and the exit lane. "What is your name again? I need to make sure Marty has your contact information correct for when we issue the new lease agreements." She sputtered, completely thrown by the sudden reversal of roles. "Lease agreements? I don't need a lease. I'm not a tenant here. I live down the street. I was just trying to patronize the businesses here. And now you will be unable to," I stated flatly, "because this parking lot, the one you decided to use as your personal stage for racial harassment, is now private property under new management." Her face went a dangerous shade of purple. The sheer injustice of being called out in public by the very person she had tried to bully into submission was too much. "This is harassment!" she shrieked, whipping out her phone again. "I'm calling the police. This is kidnapping. You're holding me hostage in this parking lot." I glanced at the truck's dashboard clock. 3:45 p.m. She had an appointment at 3:15 p.m. at Trim and Tone. "David, Marty," I said, ignoring the rising hysteria from the woman. "I need you both to understand something clearly. I bought this property because I saw potential, and frankly, because I saw an opportunity to clean up a few long-standing issues with site management and tenant relations. Marty, I need your detailed records of all complaints, infractions, and lease violations for the past 3 years on my desk by 9 a.m. tomorrow. You are on thin ice." Marty nodded frantically, pulling out a damp notepad. "Yes, sir. Absolutely, Mr. Hayes. And David," I continued, pushing the legal portfolio back into the truck, I want you to draw up a formal immediate notice of eviction for every tenant currently operating on the south lot. We're renovating, starting immediately. I want those spaces cleared within 60 days, effective immediately." David Chen raised an impressed eyebrow. 60 days is aggressive, Mr. Hayes, but legally sound given the purchase terms. Consider it done. I turned back to the woman, who was now frantically dialing 911, tears of frustration welling up as she realized her performance wasn't getting the desired result. She was no longer the righteous crusader. She was just a trespasser caught making a scene. "As for you, ma'am," I said, leaning down to her level again, my voice low and carrying just enough for her to hear over the faint dial tone. "You have exactly 60 seconds to exit my property. If you call the police, tell them you're trespassing on private commercial property owned by Daniel Hayes, and that the owner has instructed you to leave immediately, or he will have you cited for disorderly conduct." She looked terrified for the first time. The police, when they arrived, would be dealing with a situation where I was the owner, not the aggressive driver. She fumbled with her phone, realizing she had alienated the very people she might need to call for help, the property managers and potentially the police, who would prioritize the actual property owner's directive over a hysterical complaint. She started backing away, tripping over her own feet as she tried to flee toward the street entrance. I watched her scramble, taking a slow sip from the lukewarm water bottle I kept in the cup holder. Freedom. A moment of pure, deserved peace. Just as she reached the curb, ready to dart into traffic, David Chen cleared his throat loudly beside me. "Mr. Hayes, one final detail before I run these notices," he said, tapping his phone screen. "While reviewing the purchase agreement, I noticed something interesting about the previous owner's tenant roster. One of the leases was signed after. The initial sale agreement was filed, but before the final closing date." I frowned, suddenly alert again. And it's the lease for Trim and Tone," David stated, looking directly at the retreating figure of the irate woman who was now stumbling toward her car. "It appears that she, or someone connected to her, maybe her husband, maybe her sister, was in the process of signing a 5-year renewal just yesterday afternoon, expecting the old management to remain in place. It's a very favorable rate, too." My blood ran cold. The woman wasn't just a random passerby. She was tied to one of the businesses I had just ordered cleared out in 60 days. "So she wasn't just blocking traffic," David finished clinically. "She was trying to protect her investment, albeit with zero tact." I stared at the Karen, who was now fumbling desperately with her car door handle, her face a roadmap of panic. She wasn't just a random Karen blocking a black man. She was now a disgruntled, soon-to-be homeless tenant who had just publicly assaulted the new owner of the entire building. I reached for the door handle again, my initial satisfaction gone, replaced by the sickening realization that this confrontation had just become infinitely more complicated, legally and personally. I had just bought myself a direct, aggressive enemy who had a legal footing on my property. "David," I sighed, pushing the door open. "Call off the eviction notice for Trim and Tone. Effective immediately. I want a meeting with the signee of that renewal contract. I want to see exactly what she knows about the previous management's dealings before I decide how to proceed with her tenancy." I stepped out, heading not toward my truck, but toward the glowing neon sign of the salon. The Karen paused, looking back at me, her desperate hope momentarily replacing her fury. She saw me heading for the salon door, and she knew I was coming for her leverage. "Wait, Mr. Hayes, don't go in there," she shrieked, abandoning her car entirely and sprinting back towards me, abandoning all pretense of dignity. "You can't. You don't understand what you're getting into." She reached me just as my hand touched the glass door, grabbing my forearm with surprising strength. Her eyes were wide, not with anger but with genuine stark terror. "That place," she gasped, pulling me back slightly. "It's not just a nail salon, you fool. The owner, he's involved in things, illegal things. You buy this lot, you buy everything. He was running out of the back rooms." Her grip on my arm was tight, manic, and utterly sincere. The shift in her demeanor was jarring. The entitled fury was gone, replaced by a raw, almost desperate warning. For the first time since I'd pulled into the parking lot, I believed everything she was saying. Illegal things? Ah, I asked, my voice dropping low, my gaze flicking between her frantic eyes and the faintly tinted window of trim and tone. The subtle buzz from the air conditioning unit sounded suddenly sinister. Marty and David Chen, who had been hovering by my truck, now edged closer, recognizing the change in atmosphere. David's professional curiosity had morphed into genuine concern. "Ma'am, what exactly are you talking about?" David pressed, stepping up beside me. "If you have information regarding illicit activity on a property we just acquired, you need to state that clearly to the new owner." The Karen, whose name I still didn't know, but whose existence was rapidly becoming a massive complication, didn't release my arm. She kept glancing nervously toward the back door of the salon, the one that led past the shampoo stations and into what I assumed were storage closets. "My sister," she choked out, speaking quickly now, the words tumbling over each other. "Her name is Carol. She signed that renewal yesterday. She needed the rates. Her husband, Frank, he told her this place was safe. He said the owner, Mr. Rossi, promised him discretion. But Rossi's gone, right? You said you bought everything." "Rossi sold to the Harrington Trust, which sold to me this morning," I confirmed curtly. "What is Frank involved in?" "Frank is a distributor," she whispered, leaning in close enough that I could smell the minty remnants of chewing gum on her breath. "He brings high-end electronics, laptops, custom servers, networking gear, through here. He thought Rossi's back rooms were just for storage, but they aren't. They're insulated. They're built like small vaults. Frank was just moving product. He swore he didn't look too close, but Rossi was always paranoid, always demanding cash, always checking to make sure the back door was locked from the inside." My mind raced. I hadn't bought a strip mall. I might have bought a front for organized crime infrastructure. A heavily reinforced backroom in a suburban beauty salon was not the kind of appreciation I'd factored into my ROI calculations. "If Frank is just a distributor, why are you so scared now that I own the place?" I asked her. "If Rossi is gone, the operation ends." The woman, let's call her Linda for the sake of sanity, shook her head violently. "No, Frank is supposed to make a delivery tomorrow morning. A big one. He's terrified of what happens if the new owner finds it, or worse, if the people Frank works for find out Frank didn't pull the product out when Rossi disappeared." David Chen stepped forward, his face grim. "Mr. Hayes, if this involves anything related to organized distribution or potential fencing operations, we need to involve legal counsel immediately, or possibly the authorities, to establish a clear chain of custody on any recovered goods." "Not yet," I cut in, making a snap decision. I still wanted to salvage the property value and avoid a catastrophic police raid that could freeze my assets during the transition. If Frank is scared, it means people who don't like transparency are involved. If I call the police now, I invite scrutiny on my purchase, and I might scare off whatever this delivery is. I looked at Linda. "Where is Carol? Where is your sister?" "She's at home, waiting for Frank to call her back." "He's hiding out somewhere," Linda wailed, finally letting go of my arm, stepping back as if my skin burned her. I turned to David. "David, pull up the preliminary building permits and zoning for A4 through A7. I want to see what structural modifications were approved for Rossi's holdings. Focus on anything involving reinforced concrete or specialized electrical wiring behind the main tenant spaces." David nodded, already dialing his office. "On it, Mr. Hayes." I looked at Marty, the shaking property manager. "Marty, you're coming with me. You have the master keys for the entire center, right? Including the back access doors for the salons." Marty swallowed hard, pulling a heavy ring of keys from his belt loop. "Yes, Mr. Hayes. But sir, I really don't think we should, if there are dangerous people involved. We are going to pay a very short, very quiet visit to Carol's sister's place of employment," I explained, opening my truck door again. "We need to see what's in those back rooms before the next wave of clients shows up, or before Frank's associates decide to reclaim their inventory." I paused, looking at Linda. You are going to sit in the back of my truck, Carol's protector. You tell me exactly how to approach that back room, and you promise me you'll stay silent unless I tell you otherwise. If you try anything clever, I will have you arrested for theft of property time." Linda, completely broken, scrambled into the spacious rear cab of the Dually, pulling the door shut behind her. We drove the short distance to Trim and Tone. The parking lot was quieter now, The confrontation had scared off the usual afternoon shoppers. David had confirmed via a quick text exchange that Rossi's permits showed an unusually large, undocumented subpanel installed specifically behind the rear wall of the salon. Marty unlocked the front door, and the smell of chemical perms and stale hairspray hit us like a physical wave. We moved past the empty styling chairs, nodding politely to the two remaining nail technicians, who looked thoroughly confused by the sudden appearance of a property lawyer and a very large, very angry man in their workplace. We reached the narrow corridor leading to the restrooms and the back service area. Marty nervously found the key, a heavy, antique-looking brass key, and inserted it into the last door on the left. It turned with a stiff, grinding noise. The door swung inward, revealing not a storage closet, but a dark, soundproofed room. The air inside was stale and cool, completely disconnected from the humidity of the salon. There was a single industrial light fixture hanging from the ceiling, currently off. The walls were indeed lined with heavy, sound-dampening foam, and the far wall was made of thick, reinforced steel. A vault door, clearly installed after the initial building blueprints. Marty pointed a trembling finger toward the vault. That wasn't on any approved schematic I ever saw, sir. That was Rossi's private office, I think. David knelt down, examining the seam where the vault door met the concrete floor. This is professional grade. Whatever is in there, it's meant to stay hidden, or stay contained. I stepped into the room, the hard sole of my Italian loafer clicking on the bare concrete floor. I walked up to the massive steel door. There was no handle, just a modern, heavy-duty electronic keypad lock. Keypad, I noted, frustration mounting. We need a code. Suddenly, from the back of the dually parked outside, Linda screamed. It wasn't a scream of warning. It was a sharp, cutting sound of pure terror. He's here. Frank's here. He saw my car. He's coming for the delivery. I spun around, adrenaline surging. We had mere seconds. I bolted back toward the front entrance, David and Marty close behind me. Through the plate glass windows of Trim and Tone, I saw a beat-up, unmarked white van screech to a halt right in front of my F-350. A stocky man with a furious scowl jumped out of the driver's side, looking wildly around, clearly agitated about the sudden presence of the property lawyer and the new owner. He spotted Linda in the back of my truck, screaming, and then his eyes locked onto me, standing in the doorway of the salon, momentarily silhouetted against the dark interior of the back room. He clearly recognized me as the threat, the variable that had ruined his expected transaction. He didn't hesitate. He pulled a heavy-duty crowbar from the back of the van, let out a guttural roar, and charged straight for the front door of the salon, intending to bypass the lobby and head straight for the forbidden back room. He was coming for whatever was in that vault, and he clearly didn't care who he had to assault to get to it. The stocky man, Frank presumably, hit the glass door of Trim and Tone with the force of a battering ram, the crowbar meeting the reinforced storefront with a sickening crack. The glass spiderwebbed instantly. He roared again, a sound of pure, desperate panic, and swung again, aiming for the center. "Get down!" I yelled, shoving David and Marty backward just as the second blow shattered the remaining integrity of the door. Shards of safety glass rained onto the tiled floor of the reception area. Frank stumbled through the jagged opening, crowbar held high, his eyes wild and fixed on the dark corridor leading to the back. He wasn't trying to negotiate. He was trying to retrieve illicit goods before the new landlord could call the cops and seize everything. I didn't waste time shouting warnings. I met his charge head-on. Years of competitive sports and maintaining peak physical condition paid off instantly. As he swung the heavy metal bar in a wide, looping arc aimed at my head, I ducked low, stepping inside his guard. My left shoulder slammed into his ribs, a solid, driving impact that stole the air from his lungs. He grunted, the crowbar clattering uselessly onto the linoleum as his momentum carried him stumbling forward, crashing into the reception desk. Before he could recover, I had him in a tight, controlling grip, wrenching his arm behind his back in a pressure point hold I hadn't used since my brief, ill-advised stint in amateur wrestling in college. His face turned bright red, his struggle pathetic against the locked joint. "The police are already on the way, Frank," I lied smoothly, my voice dangerously calm, echoing slightly in the empty salon. "You have two choices. You can relax, Or I can break your arm while we wait for the blue lights to show up and find you standing over a shattered window with burglary tools." He froze, whimpering slightly. "Don't call the cops. I just need 10 minutes. I just need to check the safe, make sure the product is still there." "Too late," I said. "The safe is my immediate concern." David Chen, despite his tailored suit, recovered quickly, pulling out his phone. "I've already alerted dispatch to the situation, Frank. Trespassing, vandalism, and potential involvement in organized criminal enterprise, based on your associate's testimony." Frank's shoulders slumped in defeat. He was done. I held him locked for another tense minute, ensuring compliance before finally releasing the pressure, pushing him toward the remains of the front door. "You are going to sit on the curb, facing traffic until the police arrive. You will not move. You will not touch anything. You will not talk to your sister. Do you understand?" He nodded mutely. I turned back to the corridor. Marty was hyperventilating, still clutching his keys. David was back on the phone, speaking in rapid-fire legal jargon to his team. "Marty, stay here with Frank. David, you're coming with me. We're going back to that vault." We returned to the reinforced room. Now that Frank was neutralized, the threat level felt manageable, though the stakes were impossibly high. The electronic keypad on the vault was a formidable obstacle. "Rossi would have had a code," David mused, looking around the empty room. "Something memorable, but not obvious." I walked around the perimeter, running my hands over the foam padding. My eyes caught a faint, almost invisible scratch mark near the lower right corner of the keypad housing. It looked fresh, like someone had accidentally scraped it while trying to quickly enter a code in the dark. I knelt down, examining the specific number pad buttons. The 3 and the 7 looked slightly more smudged than the others, indicating frequent use. "David, when did the sale complete?" 10 a.m. this morning, officially." "And when did Linda say Carol signed the renewal?" "Yesterday afternoon. Let's assume around 4 p.m. I stood up, taking a deep breath. Rossi was paranoid, but likely vain. He sold out, but he wouldn't want the new owner immediately accessing his secrets. I punched in the numbers. 4-0-0-1-0-0-0. 4 p.m. yesterday, 10 a.m. today. Nothing. I tried the inverse. 1-0-0-0-4-0-0. Nothing. Then I looked back at the smudged keys. 3 and 7. Rossi might have sold the building, but perhaps the code was tied to his original identity or the initial purchase of the property years ago. I tried a combination I'd seen used by many old-school businessmen trying to create unbreakable codes. His birth year, maybe? Too many variables? I looked at the keypad again, focusing on the smudges. They were distinct. It wasn't a long code. Then it hit me. The reason. Linda was screaming. Frank was terrified of tomorrow's delivery. Rossi was likely gone, but the delivery, the high-end, probably stolen electronics, was still expected. The code had to be something recent, something related to the incoming transaction. I typed in the date of the expected delivery, the date Frank was panicking about. A5. Assuming today was the 14th. Beep, 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 click. The heavy steel bolts of the vault door retracted with a sound of profound finality. David Chen sucked in a sharp breath. "Mr. Hayes, this is evidence. Do not touch anything else." I ignored him, pulling the heavy door open. The room wasn't a storage vault for electronics. It wasn't an office. It was small, impeccably clean, and lined floor to ceiling with high-grade server racks, glowing with hundreds of tiny, blinking blue and green lights. In the center of the room sat a single, customized workstation, connected to a high-speed fiber line that clearly bypassed the building's normal utilities. The air hummed with the sound of powerful cooling fans. This wasn't a distribution front. This was a sophisticated, off-grid data farm. "It's not stolen laptops, David," I murmured, staring at the array of high-end processing power. "It's crypto mining, or something much worse. It's drawing massive power illegally." David stepped in, peering at the screens, which were filled with scrolling, encrypted logs, and real-time network traffic monitors. "Mr. Hayes," David whispered, his face pale beneath the glare of the server lights. "This isn't just illegal power usage. This network architecture. This is military-grade encryption. This is beyond simple fraud. We need to vacate immediately and call the FBI." Just as he spoke, the main monitor on the central workstation, The one displaying the network activity logs flickered violently. The complex scrolling text vanished, replaced by a single, stark, white message that bloomed across the black screen, directed at me. "Welcome to the network, Mr. Hayes. You should have stayed in your truck."